What if you've been labeled lazy, unmotivated, undisciplined, or stuck, when actually you're sitting on power that you've not yet learned to safely claim? Sometimes procrastination is not the absence of desire. Sometimes it's desire colliding with a protective inhibition. Part mindset, part old emotional patterning, part shadow, and sometimes something deeper. Something deeper that you're here to fulfill. And today, we're going to open that up. Because your heart, your will, they were never meant to be enemies. Your heart gives your power direction. And your will, it gives your heart the capacity to make something real. Maybe you've dreamed big, wanted more. You may have seen a vision, a version of your life as it could be. Then, when it was time to move, you may have hesitated, overthought, delayed, distracted yourself, retreated into comfort, and then maybe shamed yourself for doing too little. So you may have tried to fix it. More discipline, more motivation, more pressure, routines, criticism, and maybe that worked for a week until eventually you found yourself back in the same place because pressure cannot always resolve what pressure helped create. Sometimes your will, it may have been caged, not destroyed, caged. At some point, your system, it may have learned, my intensity is dangerous. My desire, it creates conflict. Taking up space gets me punished, and leading, it makes me a target. Wanting too much, it makes me selfish, or being powerful, it makes me unsafe. So instead of learning, I could want something and move toward it, you may have learned to contain it, to wait. Saying things to yourself like, don't risk it, don't upset anyone, don't become too much. And eventually, suppression can look like a lack of motivation. What's reassuring is that to hold back means that you have a lot of power, as it takes a lot of energy to keep your power suppressed. If when you try to move forward now, something pulls back, you may think, why am I doing this again? And another part of you, it may be saying, because this is familiar, because this is what once kept us safe. Now, does that mean that every episode of procrastination is trauma? Sometimes we're tired. Sometimes the task is wrong. Sometimes we simply don't want to do it. But when the same inhibition appears again and again and around things that you genuinely desire, well, it's worth asking what that inhibition is protecting. What gets labeled as weakness can sometimes contain unexpressed power. Energy that you learned to hold back from trusting, such as a voice that you swallowed, an impulse that you interrupted, a desire that you learned to make smaller. Well, maybe you'll find its expression. The work, it's not necessarily become more forceful. It's, can I become safe enough to experience my own power without suppressing it or using it destructively? Because those are very different things. When we experience threat, the body, it prepares us to respond. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Breath changes. Muscles, they brace. Attention, it narrows. And your voice, it becomes smaller or louder. You may want to push back, to run away, to speak, to cry, to say no, or to protect yourself. Sometimes the response we wanted to make, it wasn't possible. So we may have adapted and formed a pattern. And those patterns, they can become familiar. Certain situations later in life can evoke similar contractions, even when the original danger is no longer present. That is why trying to force motivation can sometimes feel like pushing against your own system. Or, to use the less clinical description, it can feel like trying to force your soul through a cheese grater. More pressure is not always the answer. Sometimes we need access to more of ourselves. There's a part of you that already knows your power. In the archetypal work that I use, we call this the dark masculine. It appears as the king, the queen, the sovereign, the commander, the sacred leader. And it exists beyond gender. We all carry this archetype within us. In shadow, the dark masculine power, it can become domination, entitlement, aggression, control, or conquest. But suppression of this archetype also has its own shadow. Indecision, passivity, fear of taking up space, difficulty choosing, and also waiting for permission that nobody is actually withholding anymore. An integrated dark masculine is directed power. Power that's connected to heart, acts with clarity, it moves with intention, it chooses and it claims responsibility, it creates structure, protecting what matters, moving toward what it wants without requiring someone else to become smaller. And that distinction matters. The sovereign has no need to overpower the room. Their presence is enough. They can lead without domination. They can claim without stealing. They can decide without erasing others' voices. And that part of you, it may not be missing. It may simply be underused. This is where I think dark masculine work becomes important. Will without heart can become force. Heart without will can become beautiful intention that never takes form. We want both. We want our heart to decide what matters and our will to be the guide for us to move. When the heart asks if our direction serves life and the will follows up with power to build it, that's clean power, will in relationship to love. So how do we actually shift this? In the transformational work that I use, we combine archetype-specific statements with body-based practices. The statements, they help us to find where particular ideas still create resistance and where our nervous systems are holding emotions from old stories and patterns. You might say, I'm allowed to be powerful, and your chest might tighten. You might say, I trust myself to decide, and suddenly feel like changing the subject. You might say, I can take up space, and feel your body contract. And these responses, they're useful information. They show where that statement is touching on something that's unresolved. And then we work with breath, body and voice, with movement and sound. Not to force a dramatic response, not because every sensation means that trauma is leaving, but to increase our capacity to remain present with what arises. Sometimes there's shaking, a spontaneous breath, twitches, twinges, emotions and urges to move and to sound. Sometimes the change is much quieter. And the goal is not spectacle, the goal is choice. So that when power rises, you no longer automatically suppress it. And you don't automatically weaponize it either. You can actually use it healthily. Expression restores options. If your old strategy was to swallow your anger, well, then you can learn to feel anger without becoming destructive. If your old strategy was indecision, you can practice choosing. If your old strategy was collapsing around stronger personalities, then you can practice staying present. If your old strategy was waiting until certainty arrived, you can learn to act with incomplete information. And emotions, they're energy in motion, and when less of your energy is spent fighting yourself, more becomes available for creation. As we cultivate a different state, we can pair that state with scent. Smell is closely connected with memory and with emotion. So through repetition, a particular scent can become a ritual cue, a sensory reminder of the state that you're practicing. Presence, sovereignty, direction, and will. This perfume, it doesn't create your power for you. It reminds you of the power that you're choosing to embody. And this particular scent was built around primal will, presence, and personal sovereignty. We use statements like, I'm sorry that you learnt love and power could not coexist. I'm allowed to take decisive action. I can claim what's mine and be respectful of others. I can lead benevolently and for my own pleasure simultaneously. and I'm the master of my own destiny. The statement itself, it's not magic with a C. What matters is what happens when you meet it. If the words create resistance, we become curious. We stay present, breathe, and allow expression. And over time, we build a different relationship with power. Usually integrating this archetype means that you decide faster, that you stop explaining every choice. You make the phone call, send the proposal, and you ask for the opportunity. You can end the thing and know when it's finished. And you can begin the thing that you kept postponing. You stop interpreting every obstacle as evidence that you chose incorrectly. And when action is required, you move. One client described that they'd been playing small in their business. They were avoiding decisions, they were holding themselves back. And after working with this material, they began changing how they showed up. They raised their standards, made clearer decisions, and soon after that they landed their highest paying client. Now, I wouldn't claim that one ritual caused the outcome, but the way that they participated in their business, it had changed. And different participation creates different possibilities. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, so give 100% of yourself to receive 100% back in return. And I've lived this as well, thinking that I needed more discipline when what I actually needed was a healthier relationship with my own will. I knew what I wanted as well, but there were places where I still hesitated to fully choose it. And what changed things was not simply trying harder. It was learning to stay present with the sensations as they came up when I stepped into power. I stopped treating my intensity as dangerous. I reconnected will back to heart. And when those two began working together, action became more natural. Imagine this. You make a decision, and instead of spending the next 3 hours cross-examining yourself, you act, you adjust, you learn, you move again. You know what you want without believing everyone else has to want it too. You can claim space without needing to dominate the room. You can lead without needing applause, and hear no without collapsing. You can receive yes without shrinking, and you can take what's yours benevolently without guilt. You become more directed, more grounded, more capable of turning desire into form. That version of you is not necessarily a different person. It may be you with less inhibition around your own power. If this hits something in you, pay attention. Where do you keep waiting for permission? Where does desire arise and immediately get negotiated away? Where have you known what you want and refused to choose? There may be more available to you than what you've been accessing. This is the work that we explore through the Foundations program and the Dark Masculine archetypal add-on work. The Dark Masculine perfume is the ritual anchor for this work. Your power was never meant to exist without your heart, and your heart was never meant to remain powerless. Your dreams need more than desire. They need access to your capacity to choose, to act, build, and lead. Step into your sovereignty. If this landed for you, there are 3 other archetypal patterns that shape how you show up in your life, relationships, and purpose. In the next video, Self-Abandonment Isn't Love, Heal the Inner Caretaker, we step into the light feminine and explore the pattern of supporting everyone else while slowly disappearing from your own life. It should be on the screen in just a moment.